Carson, I'm Holly Johnson, sophomore class vice president.
Hi, Brandon Church.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah,
it's great to be here.
everybody's good. Nice
Nice to meet you.
My name is Morgan Keller, and I'm the junior class vice president.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Trent Rogan, sophomore class president.
And I told them that we might give them an opportunity to ask a question or two before we move on to introduce you to other members of the union.
There's no question I haven't heard, so feel free.
What's your hope for the future of our country?
Our hope is probably capsulized by the last phrase of the Pledge of Allegiance. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's what I would truly like to see. And I think we can get that back.
Is there a political future for Dr. Carson?
Well, you know, I see myself more as a voice crying in the wilderness, trying to awaken people. And I believe that's happening, you know. Wherever we go across the nation, red states, blue states, north, south, east, west, huge enthusiastic crowds, almost as if they're shocked that somebody else thinks the way they do. They've been beaten into submission, made to think that logical thinking and common sense is like, you don't do that, and don't you dare say that stuff. And when somebody comes along and is talking the same stuff and is not afraid to say it, it's like a breath of fresh air. And you know, the hope is that people will, you know, kind of revive and become alive again and recognize that they are the power, and that they need to take the responsibility of having that power seriously.
You've got to have a take, I'm sure, on, for instance, like cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts about what happened there?
Well, my thought is that the government needs to get out of all those things. That's the problem. The government, this is exactly what the founders of our nation were afraid of. They said if the people fall asleep, the government will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, will insinuate itself into every aspect of your life, and will try to control everything that you do. Solyndra is just an example of that. It's not something that they should be into. You know, we have so many important issues to deal with in this country, and you know what particularly the secular progressive movement tries to do is they try to draw you off the topic. They want you to get involved in arguing about this and defending this, and I just don't fall for any of that stuff. You know, I guess that's something that I learned as a surgeon. You laser right in on the problem, you deal with that, and you don't get involved with a lot of peripheral issues, because that will diffuse your activities and you'll never accomplish anything.
When you talk, a lot of people would say conservative Republican. Then Carson says either Republican or Democrat.
I've been an independent for many years.
But at the same time, though, I mean, that's great. But at the same time, though, the Republicans want to embrace you. The Democrats said he's one of them. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no question that the way that I think in terms of personal responsibility, in terms of the power goes to the people and not to the government, would be much more consistent with Republican ideals. Some people think that, you know, it's strange that a black person would be a Republican, but Martin Luther King was a Republican. Frederick Douglass was a Republican. George Washington Carver was a Republican. Booker T. Washington was a Republican. You know, a lot of people who were black and of great accomplishment were Republicans. The Republicans, you have to remember, were the ones who freed the slaves. Republicans were the ones who pushed through the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, all of which were severely opposed by the Democrats. The Democrats gave birth to the Ku Klux Klan and the Jim Crow movement. And, you know, I'm going to say something that people will think is a controversial statement, but what the Democratic Party has done to a large extent to the black community, particularly since the Great Society movement, is say, there, you poor little thing, I'm going to take care of you. And that pretty much stopped the great progress that the blacks were making. And I don't think it's a particularly kind thing to put people in a position where they become dependent. And we need all of us to just stop and think about what we're doing and ask ourselves, is there something that we can do to encourage all members of our society to begin to excel and to begin to have the American dream again? Not to think about just being sustained, but to think of moving up the ladder. That is what America is about. Marriage has always been between a man and a woman. As I've said many times, any two adults can do anything they want. They can have a legal ceremony, a civil union, whatever they want to call it, but it's not marriage. You can't just redefine something like that. If you redefine it one time, then in 50 years when another group comes along and said, well, we want it redefined, and pretty soon it means nothing. And we have to have meaning. We have to have pillars of society that have meaning. Once we start to destroy those, we become just like the Roman Empire.